All right, guys, at 6:15, we'll call the meeting to order. Did everybody get a chance to review the minutes from the previous meeting?
I did. I had one correction. I think instead of poaching Norfolk Southern, we should be approaching Norfolk Southern.
You're correct.
I think that's what it was supposed to say. Yeah.
All right, so we got the one minor change there. Any others?
With that change, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right, we got a motion.
I'll second that.
All in favor? All right, Mr. Peabody, what do we have in financial report?
No different than last month, except that, about $1 of interest that it earned, but we've got $62,700 in the bank right now.
Okay.
Same it's been for a long time.
I understand. All right, down to old business, secretary replacement discussion. Mari, did we have?
I did discuss that with my sister. She said she was going to think about it because she feels like that's a lot of pressure and she doesn't want to mess up.
Right.
Just because she would be new to it, so she said she would consider it.
Okay.
And maybe have her come to a meeting.
Yeah, and that's what I told her. I mentioned it to her. But, they have the CrossFit reopening, like rename and everything because we bought it out from the previous owners.
Right.
So her and her boyfriend Tyler are actually the owners now to it.
Okay.
So they've had a lot going on with
Sure.
that. So they're finally getting squared away with everything, back on track. So she may be a little bit more motivated now to do it. Yeah.
Right.
So I'll re-talk to her about it. Hopefully she'll come
Next
soon.
meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right, if that's all we've got on that, we'll move on down to new business. We've got a guest speaker here, Mr. Dan McCrae. Thank you for coming today.
I'm glad to be here. I am an unusual lawyer in a lot of ways, and one of them is that I'm soft-spoken. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Good. And I've been doing this long enough. I remember actually doing a presentation with an overhead projector. Y'all remember those? But today nobody can talk without a PowerPoint, so I put one kind of quickly together, and I called it flashcards because it's mainly just cutting and pasting from other presentations, for one thing, and for another, it's like a flashcard in that it kind of asks the questions, but it's different because I give you the answer. So it's kind of a flavor of the various things that you need to know. And I picked the topics based on the input I got as to what folks were interested in.
Okay.
But I'm really just here to tell you everything you need to know about DDAs, and we're afraid to ask, so don't be afraid.
Okay.
And with that, I'll just start madly clicking away. Beginning with why we have them in the first place. Georgia is a state, we're an authority state. Not all states are. South Carolina has one development authority that does all the deals across the state. Georgia, every city and county has a citywide or countywide authority, and every city has a DDA, whether you want it or not, because the General Assembly created them with legislation. And the mayor and council, in the case of a citywide authority or a DDA, just activate them by resolution. So one reason that we do that, Georgia has and has had for a long, long time, a AAA bond rating. And we put these authorities in front of local governments in the state that have taxing power, so that if anybody gets in trouble, it's not somebody that can call on the taxpayers to pay it. And that's codified in that's the Development Authorities Law, but the same provision is in the Downtown Development Authorities Law. That's my superhero. These days you got to have a superhero, whatever you do, and that's Authority Man. He's got a little DDA in the center of his star there. Protecting the city, I don't know whether y'all have had any controversy or tough decisions or had any hot potatoes tossed in your lap because the elected folks don't want to deal with them, but keep doing this long enough and you will. And that's also on purpose. We have appointed officials. Y'all are public officials. I don't know whether you run for office or not, but you didn't run for this office. But you've got it. And so you're subject to open meetings, open records, conflicts of interest, getting your name in the paper and everything else. And part of that is to take something that has to be done, that thought has to be given to, and to reach a decision even though it may not be the popular decision. And adding powers, that's an amendment to the Georgia Constitution that General Assembly proposed and the voters approved in 1968, the year that I graduated from Emory College. And the significance of that was that before that amendment, economic development was not a public purpose, and there was no authorization to create development authorities. Every citywide authority, countywide authority, downtown development authority created by statute all flows back to the same amendment to the Georgia Constitution. And it doesn't say economic development is a good thing, all y'all cities and counties and public bodies go do it. It says that because of that, we're creating these development authorities which have that as their governmental mission. So you've got a governmental mission of, well, I'll show you. I've got a little flow chart here. Let me skip ahead. Oops. There it is. So you go back to the Constitution, trade, commerce, industry, and employment opportunities. And the flow chart flows down only part of all of that to the Downtown Development Authority, because you only exercise those powers for purposes of redevelopment and revitalization and only within the central business district. If you had a citywide authority, they would have all of those powers citywide. But the General Assembly kind of made up for that because under some other laws, they imported into the DDA law some special powers. So you can be designated by the city as the Urban Redevelopment Agency under the Urban Redevelopment Law. You can be designated to carry out supplemental services in a business improvement district. The city has a tax allocation district, and the city is the redevelopment agency, but they could have, within the downtown area, designated the DDA as the redevelopment agency. So a DDA is actually one of the most powerful authorities that the General Assembly has created. Now you see sitting over there in the left-hand corner, all by themselves, not playing, that's the city and the county, because the General Assembly, the Constitution, did not give to them that governmental mission. It gave them to authorities. Now, backing up a little bit, some powers are shared. So, for example, the redevelopment powers law that I mentioned, there's another constitutional amendment for that that authorizes tax allocation districts, and that's a local government power, although they can bring the DDA in, as I said, to be the redevelopment agency. But plain out, full throat economic development, that's a development authority or DDA function. And as you sit here and hear more and more, you learn more and more, and as you do more and more, you learn. I hope it's not by trial and error. I hope you learn from other folks' mistakes. But you are or will become a subject matter expert, and your subject is revitalization and redevelopment. You know, a long time ago, the city manager of Villa Rica many years ago was a guy named Tom Moody. Y'all know Tom? He's a great fisherman.
Lake Moody?
Okay.
Yeah. So I came out years ago to visit with Tom. He said, it's not that glamorous being a city manager. You think it's a big, important job, but when there's a dead dog in the middle of the street, I'm the one that gets the call day or night. So that is the function of a general unit of government, a city or a county. The role of the authority is more limited, and so when it comes to questions of economic development and redevelopment, the city will and ought to lean on organizations like the DDA to carry that out. It's an important role, and there's a Rosalind Carter quote again. I don't want y'all to be nervous, particularly Marisol's sister, about becoming a member of the DDA. It's not all tough stuff, but it's part of the job to make tough decisions. So back to the hierarchy. This is a lesson in state government, and we begin by reminding everybody that development authorities and DDAs are creatures of the state. They're not a home rule local authority. You're not a board or a commission or an agency. There's a lot of confusion about that. I mean, some cities and counties think that they just wave their hand and make you go away. And there are provisions now for dissolving citywide and countywide authorities and for DDAs. You have to take into account whether you've got bonds outstanding and stuff like that. But it's not like we created you, we can change you, we can remove you from office. It's not like that. So development authorities and DDAs fall under the General Assembly. And I've got them lined up on a par with cities, which are like development authorities created by the General Assembly. Cities are created by local act. That's their charter. And counties are a political subdivision of the state. There's a lot of confusion about what the word political subdivision means, but it's in the Constitution. That's why sheriffs and sheriff's deputies have statewide jurisdiction. They're agents of the state. And then you have the executive and judicial branches. But the point of that is that it is a mighty thing to be a development authority or a DDA. And that's how it works. That's a nested Venn diagram. I'm sort of a Excel and PowerPoint nerd. But it is true in this state that if you want to carry out economic development and do projects, in these days it takes the ability to provide incentives. You got to have the powers to do that listed in your act, because unlike natural people, an authority doesn't have any implied powers. We have the powers that the General Assembly and the Constitution give us. And then to issue bonds. And Georgia's a state that relies heavily on a bond structure involving a lease in order to get things done. And that's literally a development authority or a DDA are the only place that all that comes together. And that's, I keep saying this over and over again. If you've been to training, you may have heard me say it before. This is not only the most important slide in my presentation, but the most important slide in anybody's presentation. This tells you what to believe and who's in charge. The most in charge is at the top, and the least is in charge is at the bottom. You see your friendly lawyer down there at the bottom, because the lawyer works for the board don't work for the lawyer. U.S. Constitution on top and the Georgia Constitution below that, and I kind of give you the answer, and you may have heard me ask this question before, but why is the Constitution the most in charge? What makes it so? I told you I'd be asking y'all questions if you didn't ask me questions. It's because it's the compact that we make with each other. I mean, we have no voice in what the General Assembly does. We elect them, they go to Atlanta, they do what they do, and then finally they come home, and they do that every year. But the Constitution is the Constitution because the voters approved it. We had a voice in that. And a majority of the voters approved the Constitution and all the amendments. Georgia likes to amend the Constitution. But it's hard to complain about something that you agreed to. And as confusing as public policy and what the General Assembly and the governor do, and most of all what Congress does, can be sometimes, it all comes back to the Constitution. That's, I've heard it referred to as the law of the land, but it's only the law of the land because the people say it is. And below that you have specific laws like the Downtown Development Authority's law and applicable laws that apply to virtually all public bodies like open meetings and open records, except the General Assembly exempted themselves like they always do. So applicable laws are like a rifle shot. It hits you because they meant to. They meant to create DDAs. Applicable laws, they feel like it's a good thing for everybody, so they're general application. And you have to get in the middle of the layer cake before you run into the city again. It's a local government authority, but it's a creature of the state, and the role of the city is to activate it and appoint the members, and with a DDA to designate the downtown development area. And at that point, you know, you and the city can each go your own ways, but that's not good. Stakeholders are important. It's important to have a good relationship with the city. And I didn't include this slide, but there is a special exception to the rule against self-appointment. Generally speaking, in Georgia, because of the common law, an appointing body can't appoint somebody from its own membership. But there's an exception. The city could appoint a city councilman or the mayor to be a member of the DDA, and same with citywide authorities and counties. And I have found that the relations between cities and their city authorities and cities and their DDAs is usually very good, and it doesn't stop with the activating resolution. It continues on, and there tends to be more of a good working partnership with a city and its DDA and a city and its citywide authority than you find with counties and countywide authorities, for example. Then you have the bylaws. I read your bylaws. Where'd the bylaws come from? Well, the directors approved them, and why are the bylaws on top of the board of directors? Because if you make the rules, you got to live by the rules until you change the rules. And there are things like notice to call a special meeting and stuff like that can be inconvenient, but if they're in the bylaws, you gotta follow them. Board of Directors, they are appointed by the city. Officers are elected by the board. Staff, do we have any staff? And are y'all employees of the DDA, or do you work for the city? That's the second way to do it. Y'all are seconded to the DDA, and that is a very good thing. It's difficult these days. This sort of business is much more complicated than it was when I started out. There's all sorts of rules and regulations and scrutiny and 3 a.m. Bloggers and stuff like that. So if you're going to keep up with that and keep good books and records and get your notices out the way that they should be and things like that, it's important to have a staff, because if you don't, you're going to have to do it yourself. And then, as I said, below that is the attorney. It's not true that we have too many lawyers in this country. Some people have to actually share a lawyer that has more than one client. The city attorney is not automatically the attorney for the DDA or the citywide authority. There's some confusion about that. So a DDA can and should appoint its own attorney. And what are you doing with all these good things? Depending on what version of the DNA of your DDA that y'all have, you may see this. I have this one I went and found one of my early PowerPoints, and I thought maybe for this group it'd be better to do that, because DDAs over the years have done some incredible things. I represent the Doraville DDA. We did the assembly project with a lot of this redevelopment of the GM plant, which started out to be a mixed-use development, and Great TV bought it, and now it's going to be Movie City. It's really, really fabulous. And that DDA also was the lead agency on a statewide project, the Serta Simmons project, which was a headquarters and R&D project. So they're just, doing great things. Facade grant programs come up a lot, and I did a thoroughly scientific survey about how many DDAs do that, meaning I Googled it, and I counted to 40 and quit. So it's probably more than 40. There's at least 40 Georgia DDAs that do facade grant programs. And Georgia's Constitution has a prohibition on the public sector conferring a gift or gratuity on the private sector, and our court, I think it was a Court of Appeals. That would have been the Supreme Court probably. It just, even in their wisdom, has decided that prohibition on gifts or gratuities applies between public bodies. So I see on your agenda that the city's getting ready to forgive a loan. There needs to be some consideration going back to the city in exchange for that. In the state grant programs for economic development in 1995, the Attorney General ruled that forgivable loans were unconstitutional. And that same principle, I mean, you might be doing a $100 or $1,000 or $2,500 facade grant, not doing a, $3 million state grant for some big high-tech project. But the same rules apply to both. You need to put in, if you're doing this, you need to put in your application that the applicant agrees, if he gets the grant, that he will design and install the facade in accordance with, and put something in there, the specs, and then say that so as to promote the revitalization and redevelopment of the central business district. And for that kind of money, that's good enough. For something else, it's a lot more complicated. Madison has a really good downtown manager, and they've done a lot. I pirated this off of their website as an example of how they do this sort of thing. Sugar Hill, Paul Radford, who was the #2 guy at DCA and then GMA, and now he's a city manager in Sugar Hill in Gwinnett County, has done a fabulous job there. I don't represent that DDA, but they've presented for me, and they've been central to some things like the town center and the town green. And Paul's approach to that was control the real estate. If anybody doing projects or in commercial real estate knows, if you don't control the land, you don't have a project. So that's what he did, and they've done some bond issues through the authorities there and raised enough cash to be able to buy the land, and then he'll cut public-private partnership deals with private sector developers, and they have to build to his standards and do what he wants done. And that's an overview that Paul gave of this is a few years old now, of what they've been able to accomplish doing that. I got a house by a pond. I couldn't afford a lake in Dublin, and this is the tallest building between Macon and Savannah. It don't look too good in that picture there, but it's been redeveloped, and I really should get a current image and put it before and after. And I don't represent that DDA either, so I can brag on them. They really did a great job of partnering with the city. And there was a local citizen, Mr. Walters, who was at the time on the board of the Georgia Ports Authority. He's got a lot of money. So they brought him in as a partner, convinced him to buy it, and used, I think it was, historic tax credits, not new markets tax credits, as part of the capital stack. And you usually sell those credits to get equity for the project, but Mr. Walters had enough money he could use the credits himself. So that worked out extremely well. There's offices there. Georgia Military College has classrooms there. There's a cafeteria on the ground floor. So if you're in Dublin, stop by. Somebody asked me about money. You know what the golden rule is? If you got the gold, you make the rules. And this is one of Dan's rules for life. If you follow me on social media, every now and then I get on a tear and start sharing my rules for life. One of them is if you've got money, anything's possible. If you don't, nothing is. And I think that's true. Here's a way that you can get some money. I represent the Shambley Dda. That's another DDA that's done a lot of fabulous things, including assembly of land for town center, negotiating with master developers, issuing contract revenue bonds to finance it all. And they've done some really good transformative projects downtown too. But at the very first meeting, they were sitting around thinking, well, you know, why are we here? And somebody said, well, the city said that if we activated a DDA, DCA would give us some money. Fun fact, they won't. But the city did. The city gave them a $50,000 seed grant, and they built on that. And the city they did such a good job. The next year, the city came back and wanted to give them another $50,000, and one of the directors wanted to turn it down. I said, Van, no, take the money. And we have built on that. This is one of the development authorities, or DDAs, that's had the opportunity to do a lot of property tax savings deals. A lot of those, not all of them, are with multifamily and mixed-use developments that have a long-term deep discount abatement program, and the DDA has cut themselves in. They get an annual fee, which is not huge, but it's not small either, that has provided a source of income for them for their programs. They're mostly using that now to repay those bonds I mentioned. But you started out with nothing, then the city gave you a little money, then you kicked into gear, you got some deals going, and then you let growth start to pay for itself. There is confusion sometimes about whether development authorities can tax, and I've asked this question sometimes in my training, and I have people tell me with a straight face, oh yeah, development authorities can tax. Well, they can't. There are a few DDAs that were created by local amendment to the Georgia Constitution before the statewide law, before the Constitution was amended and the statewide laws were passed. And some of those, a few of those city DDAs, constitutional DDAs, have the ability to levy their own tax or assessment within their central business district. Athens has that power, Athens DDA, and Marietta's DDA has that power. Marietta uses it every year. They do, good things, and the members, those constitutional DDAs usually, they are elected. You have two classes of voters usually, property owners within the central business district and business operators. And like a CID, they vote for whoever's going to be on the DDA. So it's almost like a CID with self-assessment. Not all of them are like that, but that system seems to work. But the usual source is your sugar daddy, the city. And you can come once a year and what I call sing for your supper and tell them what you have done and want to do and say, oh, please put some money in the budget for me this year. It's difficult to do any kind of long-range planning if you don't know from year to year, and you can't hire anybody. How are they going to know that they'll have a job when that current appropriation runs out? Or you can enter into a multi-year contract with the city. That's an intergovernmental agreement. You can bind your successors. DDAs aren't subject to that can't bind your successors rule anyway, but cities and counties are, except with a contract with another public body, which is an intergovernmental contract. So you can have a contract for up to 50 years with the city for up to 3 mills of tax to be devoted to financially assist the DDA. An increasing number of authorities get that. They don't get it for 50 years and they don't get it for 3 mills, but they do get, a lot of them, a multi-year commitment, even if it's only a few years of funding. And there's that 3 mill limitation I mentioned. And then, you know, state loans and grants, yeah, there are some, but they're mostly for specific programs. An underlooked source of money is private sector grants or in-kind contributions. I think if somebody could find if you're Albany, for example, I've done work for their DDA and for their Albany Dowry Intercity Authority, which is a redevelopment agency down there. And I've told them if they ought to get a grant writer and write this, you know, tearful grant application to all the big corporations, they get some money. They would, but they haven't done it. And then transaction fees. If you do a bond issue, I mean, you're going to charge at least 1/8 to 1%, unless it's for the city. You wouldn't charge a financing fee on doing a deal for the city. But if you have tax-exempt bonds, there's a federal tax rule that limits you to 1/8 to 1% of the bond amount. If the bonds are taxable, it's whatever you can negotiate. And that's usually one time at closing, but like I said, there's a tendency for profit sharing with citywide authorities and DDAs. If you have a deal that's, I mean, I'm not saying do deals just to make money, but if you have a deal that needs to be done and you're making the economics work by providing an incentive, then there's usually enough margin in there to provide you with some funding so you continue to carry out your governmental mission over the period of the lease. And I don't know if this is the last one or not, but I wanted to flag, first of all, y'all need to know about this. I mean, ethics and all this kind of stuff is a hot issue these days. Under House Bill 923, which passed the House and Senate and which are in front of the governor now, there's a new sheriff in town. Not only can the governor investigate and sanction for violations of the Code of Ethics, but the State Transparency Commission now can. They were trying to, just Mary Margaret Oliver out of Decatur was trying to get something passed where the local government could create its own little private Spanish Inquisition for local authorities, but the General Assembly did not let that go through. But it is a concern. There is high visibility these days. There are sanctions that the governor can impose removing from office. And then there's just all sorts of trouble you can get into, particularly if you violate number 9 here, which is financial self-dealing. People think that's all conflicts is the money. And one of Dan's rules for life is when somebody says it's not about the money, it's about the money. But ethics is more than that. If you look at all these other things, you know, you can't, number 2, who was the guy who was interviewed on radio when he just got elected governor? What's the first thing you're going to do now that you've been elected governor? I'm going to reward my friends and punish my enemies. You can't do that under number 2. You can't appropriate confidential information, number 4. I don't know what they mean by expose corruption wherever discovered. I guess don't hide stuff. 4 is don't take bribes. 7 is really don't take bribes. 8 is conduct unbecoming. And I actually was, how much time y'all got? I'm just going to start telling war stories if I don't want to. But I actually was hired one time where I was already representing the authority, and they'd fallen out with the county, and they'd appointed the village idiot to the board. But then the county and the development authority kissed and made up, and the village idiot was still on the board. And the question then became, how do we get rid of this guy? It writes a letter to the editor every week about how awful everybody is, and we were looking at number 8. I mean, when you run around trashing and bad-mouthing authority that hadn't done anything wrong, that might be conduct unbecoming if you're a board member. We'll never know because they kissed and made up. There's a safe harbor for financial self-dealing. There are 4 things that have to be done. If you or your family or your business or anybody that's a virtual you is about to do business with the authority, there's a way not to get in trouble. There's a safe harbor. You disclose the conflict in advance. It's entered into the minutes. It's published in the newspaper. Get your name in the paper. And then you have to absent yourself from the meetings. You can't discuss and you can't vote. So those are the rules. And I really think in most cases that's effective. I'm not aware of a case where somebody's tried to do that and it hadn't worked. But I think a flagrant transaction that was unfair to the authority, I think a judge would find a way around that. Did I put that in there twice? Yeah, I sure did. And that tells you what it means. Basically, anything worth $200 in a calendar quarter is substantial, so that means everything is. And then a word about executive sessions. House Bill 397, which is not new now, that was passed in 2012 when Sam Olens was Attorney General. He studied the Florida Open Meetings and Open Records Law, which is a horrible place. I was in Florida one time. I come out of a meeting. I was walking down the street with a city councilman and another city councilman that had been in the meeting. This was an open meeting. Crossed the street, so he would not pass the person I was walking with. And I said, "Why is that?" And they said, "In Florida, 2 people is a meeting." So I mean, I don't know how they get anything done, but they do. So here's a list of things that can be discussed and voted on in executive session. Settlements, authorized negotiations to acquire, dispose of, or lease property, an appraisal, a contract to purchase, dispose, lease property, to enter into an option. But you're going to see on the next slide, don't get too excited, because you might authorize somebody to go and negotiate a purchase and sale agreement, but that is in executive session. But that contract is not binding unless it's voted on in an open meeting. And this comes up a lot when you're assembling property downtown, particularly for a town center or town green or something like that. You might have a real estate broker, and you might engage that broker, and you might tell them to go sound out property owners downtown and don't tell them who you represent. And if somebody wants to do a deal, work out a contract, call the DDA attorney, work out a contract, and they can sign it and bring it back to us, and so we can receive it and vote on it in open session. There's a lot of different ways to do things, but seriously, and you have to sign an affidavit. It just, the law says only the chair has to sign the affidavit that only exempt topics were discussed in executive session. Best practice, get everybody to sign so their memories don't change as time goes by. I'm going to skip over this. If you're hiring somebody to be your executive director, this gets to be really sensitive sometimes, though, because if somebody is applying for a position, sending your resume, they don't want their current employer to know, but the public needs to know. So what you do is you get your top 3 and then let the other 2 know they're not going to make the cut and they withdraw, and then you announce the one that survives. Procedure, and again, I don't know how important executive session is to you, but there has to be, whether to do it or not comes up in open session. There has to be a motion to enter executive session, and you've got to say what the exempt purpose is, and you take minutes of executive session. And then you have to police it to make sure that you don't start talking about things that you shouldn't, sign the affidavit, and then your executive session minutes are kept in a separate book than your open session minutes. So that's about all I thought I had time to do. I saw that your last meeting lasted 25 minutes. If you started at 6:15 and left at 6:40, I didn't want to take up all your meeting time. But if you have other questions, y'all know where to find me.
You open for questions right now?
Sure, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I think, as far as a lawyer, what's your recommendation on trying to find a lawyer? We are in search of that right now. Is there a good source for that? Do they need to be specific for DDA law? Do they at least need to know that information?
A lawyer is a professional, and if you're going to do business with a professional, it's always good to choose one who knows what he's doing, because one that don't will get you in more trouble than you can imagine. Okay. So yes. And it's really, the Australians have a saying, horses for courses, right? I mean, if you on a soggy course, you want a horse that runs good on soggy ground. If it's dry, you want a horse that runs good on dry ground. They do a lot of horse racing in Australia. The plain vanilla everyday stuff an everyday lawyer can do. And a lot of places, city attorneys represent the DDA. Honestly, I mean, there's a lot of city attorneys I like, and some of them I think do a good job representing the DDA, but I don't think it's a good idea. I mean, you will be asked sooner or later to sign an intergovernmental agreement, and there's a conflict there. If you're going to be doing complicated deals, I mean, there's not many that know how to do that are interested in representing a DDA. So, I mean, I can, I told Janet I'd give some thought to that, and I haven't really come up with a good idea, but I can probably come up with a name or two and send to y'all to look at. I mean, you could do an RFP. You could let GMA know. But I don't think you first of all, you get applications from the wrong people. I don't respond to RFPs. You're a lot better off going the word of mouth route. Does it need to be somebody local, somebody that you'd want to go to your meetings, or how up close and personal is the need to have the lawyer in the vicinity or in your meetings?
What's your recommendation? I mean, I don't see, unless we were in need of legal advice, if they would have to be in person. But could you do that as a Zoom, or could you at least have them on standby for that?
You would. COVID is a terrible thing, but it's certainly been good for my quality of life, because I haven't had to run around the state as much as I have. And I've had as many as 4 authority meetings in one day, on more than one day during a week, seriously. I mean, it's a good way to do business, and it cuts down on your legal costs. If somebody doesn't have to travel, or if he's can multitask while he's doing it, that's a good way to do it. You know, it's always good to have your lawyer at your meetings if you can afford it. But a lot of times, depending on what you're doing, it's not really needed. As long as you have got a good understanding of what your legal requirements are, so you don't get in trouble with open meetings, open records, conflicts, posting notice of your meetings, things like that. You know, I think it works better with a lot of DDAs just to have the lawyer on call, and I do that a lot. I say, look, you know, I've looked at your agenda. There's nothing legal on it. You know how to reach me. Call my cell. Let me know, or I can call or Zoom in at a particular time if you want, and we can get it done that way. That opens up your choices a lot. Really, the only way to get, and I'm it's personal opinion, but the only way to get good at this sort of thing is to have a lot of experience at it. So you either represent, you know, for example, Invest Atlanta, but the problem with that is they think they are the government, so they make up all the laws, so they don't have to pay too much attention to what they say. But if you represent an entity like Invest Atlanta, you're going to see a lot of transactions, even if that's your only client. But you only see their transactions. You don't get a breadth of experience. So it's good to have experience, and it's good to have experience all over, and it's good to have experience with tough things. And there are not many people like that, and they're not scattered all over the state. So I would suggest that you, if it's not necessary that you have some, if you want somebody local, that's fine, and that's your prerogative, if there is somebody. If you want somebody in your meetings, that's also fine. So you need to think about how much a fine you want and are willing and able and feel like you need to pay for. And then if y'all can let me know that, I can try to find somebody who, or a couple of people who meet those specs.
Okay. Other topics that kind of came up. We want to work more with the city based on what you said. I mean, it's everything we're designed to do. But what's our first step to do? What's a tangible action that we can have with that?
Well, you ought to have somebody at every city council meeting. I don't know if you do or not. You could invite council to have a liaison to come to our meetings here. Those would be good things. And then as you see opportunities, I mean, you can be reactive, which a lot of people do, and then they sit for years and wonder why nothing ever happened. Or you can try to figure out things that need to be done, and then you figure out what the city could do to help, is able to do to help. And so I have another slide I wish I'd sent about the stakeholders and how you build a process in a project. But as you define something that needs to be done, whether it's putting out the flags on the 4th of July or facade grants, or in McRae, Georgia, where I grew up, we've got a little statue of the Statue of Liberty. Have y'all ever seen that? Mm-hmm. It wasn't there when I was growing up, and it's kind of a ridiculous thing to do, but it's gotten a lot of attention. So if you come up with something like putting up the Statue of Liberty downtown, and you need some city funding, or you need piece of land to put it on, or you need somebody to maintain it. That's your idea. You bring it to the city, you talk it through, they tell you what they can do and are willing to do, and then you're doing something with them.
Okay.
I hadn't thought about the Statue of Liberty in a long time. It's amazing.
So money-wise, it looked like there were 3 options, grants from either the state or large corporations, which, I don't know that we're going to find anybody here like that. Wheeling and dealing, coming up with, projects and finding backers and things like that, or a sugar daddy. Does that?
First of all, there's some prerequisites for this. In order for the city to provide you with some funding, you've got to have a need that you require funding for. So we're kind of back to your question. What is it we're going to do? They're not just going to give you money to give you money. You've got to have a need. A large corporation, it's the same thing, written larger. I mean, I mentioned Albany. I love that part. So when I was growing up in McRae, you could get Channel 13 in Macon, black and white, terrible, or you could get Channel 10 in Albany. So those were the big cities to me, two TV stations. So I have a fondness for those communities, and I like to see them do well. And if they, and you asked, so I'm not preaching, but they've been hit by a hurricane, 2 tornadoes, and a flood. Their fine arts museum got flooded, and the collection had to be relocated to the High Museum of Art in Atlanta. If that ain't a grant application, I don't know one when I see it, but they didn't do it. Now, I'm not wishing you a flood, a hurricane, and a couple of tornadoes, but if you find something that needs to be done that plays social impact is what folks are looking for. Find something that does social impact. And then hire a grant writer. Maybe that's your request to the city. Help us, give us some seed money so we can build on it. Transactions, again, you don't do a transaction for the sake of a transaction, but if you've got somebody coming in, get some property tax abatement in your downtown development area, the DDA can do that, and you can charge a fee on it.
We've had several properties come up for sale in the downtown area that didn't get utilized. If their end use wasn't really what the city would have benefited from. But without access, fairly rapid access to funds, those opportunities come and go, and you can't partake unless you've got a bankroll.
That's right. Well, that's another reason to have your own funding, is to build up a war chest.
But you can't get funding unless you have a need. So is a war chest a need?
Well, you could have somebody else who has a need that you could respond to, like a developer, for example, or the city. I mean, the ship has sailed about who's going to be the redevelopment agency, but that theoretically was an opportunity for you, and there may be other TADs.
Yeah, I don't know that we'll have another one in the downtown area, another TAD.
The downtown development area is what the city says it is.
I know, because we wrote the new TAD into the DDA.
And that was a good thing.
So what are some other avenues for funding? I mean, Shannon's put together the farmers market that will benefit some from that, but it's not going to be exponentially over the first year probably, but it'll bring in some funds. What are some other ways other than what we just talked about?
Well, I mean, that's an event. and I didn't, maybe I should add that to my slide, but the slide actually had the things that I've run across over the years that work. You know, I mean, you could, this is theoretical, this really doesn't make any sense for you, but if you have a severely distressed census tract in your area, then you can create a community development entity and try to get an allocation of new market tax credits. There's good money in being a CDA. Plus, you bring something to the table if you control that allocation. But, I mean, it's transaction, event, city, foundation, or the state for programs. And, you know, a grant, that includes somebody giving you things. I mean, I've had authorities actually be given buildings, and that's provokes my speech about there's environmental liability attached. The federal government treats you the same as anybody else. You could be acquiring something that is a huge liability and not an asset. But if it is an asset, then that gives you property to work with, property you can rent, property you can sell. Unfortunately, that mostly happens when a company is closing an operation down and it's the plant's in a rural area and there's no buyer for it. So that's not a great opportunity for Villa Rica. Wonderful things are happening in Villa Rica now. I mean, it's this, the economy's growing, and so your opportunity is not on the downside, it's on the upside.
So we can be our own landlord?
Dahloneg's doing that. The city has tagged the DDA to be the vehicle for acquisition of a building that they will use the upstairs for their offices and will rent the downstairs.
Similar to Made Mercantile and Woodstock, doing the same thing. Yep.
Any other thoughts or questions anybody got for Dan?
Well, my only thought, like, this was more like a suggestion. I still have to do, like, my homework on it. When you go to, like, Atlantic Station and, like, Arbor Place Mall, they have, like, the little train. And being that we are, like, divided, like, the city is known for its train tracks. Like, I was saying, like, look into, like, potentially renting or buying out one of those little trains that the kids can ride around on. And they're, like, charge $5 a person. And that's, like, I easily spent, like, $20, $30 for, like, 10 minutes. And it's just, like, money that adds up. And we could do something around, like, when we fix, like, this little area, like, the repaving and all that, we can possibly make, like, a little train track to where kids and families could ride around, like, especially, like, when farmers market is happening or the events, the movie theater. That's just extra income for us. So that was an idea that I had, and I wanted to put out there for you guys.
Be like the pony ride, but cleaner.
Yeah, but cleaner.
Exactly.
We're also creating a downtown amenity, and that's very important. I mean, to keep downtowns vibrant these days, you got to give people a reason to go there.
To come,
an
yes,
experience.
Exactly.
Be sure to get liability insurance.
So it wouldn't be the Statue of Liberty, but a little train.
Did you hear him? Make sure we get liability insurance.
Right. It always comes with something. But other than that, I don't have anything right now.
It'll probably come to you at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
That's what happens to me. So send Janet an email. Or call her.
Are the slides that you present today, are they all part of this packet, or?
I printed your
Janet,
master list. Yep. I
Well,
printed that.
okay, but this is, that one is different than that.
Yep, and I'll print that out, what he talked about today. I'll print that out for you guys. Yep.
And again, go to, see that website up there, danmccrae.com?
Mm-hmm.
There's a gazillion papers up there.
Okay.
Well, we thank you very much for coming and your insight.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for your service. I mean that. It's exciting times for Villa Rica, and y'all are in an exciting position, so enjoy it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Dan.
All right, moving on down to the next section. Item 2 is City Council's voted to forgive the $75,000 from July of 2018 for the roof at Butterballs and to cancel the $450,000 promissory loan.
Yeah, so, go ahead,
Based on
Carl.
what Dan just said, though,
Yeah, correct.
it sounds like we need to have some sort of, not just cancel it.
Pay them back $1 for the debt or
He
something
said there
to that
should be
effect.
some sort of exchange that takes place, not just a cancellation.
From what I know from previous things, as far as what he said as well, there has to be some sort of transaction fee, as long as like it's a small whatever, like $1 if that's what they agree on. But as long as there's something there that says like we bought it out and it wasn't forgiven, it always just it's safer. From what I know, again.
Tom, do you have any input? No.
Okay.
We'll talk to the city attorney.
Okay. Just so that something will up and up.
Yes.
Perfect. Farmers Market. Shannon, do you have any updates?
I do. Okay, the farmers market, we've talked about it on WLBB. I'm posting on the Mill Amphitheater page, little highlights of every single vendor. We have Ithaca beef, fresh juices, herbs, bakery items that are 100% gluten-free and vegan. Coffee will be here every week. We have 2 vendors who are sharing a spot. One will be the first and third Monday, and the second will be the second and the fourth Monday. It'll be at the Mill Amphitheater. I originally planned for the parking lot, but I think the amphitheater will be better. Villarica Yoga will be offering classes from 6 p.m. to 6:45. We're also going to put out cornhole and Connect 4. I'm looking for some kind of other entertainment to fill the 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock time slot, just so we can have increased foot traffic. As of this afternoon, we've talked to Melissa at Uncork to see about doing complimentary wine tastings and selling wine by the bottle. And we're going to reach out to Little Vine as well in Villarica to see if they want to do the same. We have about 25 vendors. The library is also going to come out and participate, and I've invited Parks and Rec to see if they wanted to come out and participate as well. Butter Dutter will be on site for May 2nd from 4 to 7. And I'm inviting other food trucks out as well. So if y'all have any that you know of that you think would come out, let me know.
Okay. Do you need volunteers from any one of us?
If one person would like to come.
I'll be there in support, but do you need actual physical help of?
No, I shouldn't. We've made this to where it's very easy on city staff. So everybody's been told to bring their own chairs, tables, and tents. I am going to have an info tent out. I've printed some coloring pages for kids to give out that are farmers market themed. I'm going to use it as an opportunity to showcase our other events for Main Street. If y'all want to come out, I will probably come down and get one of y'all on Facebook to do a little interview. Maybe not an interview, but digital content performs better on social media, so I needed somebody to talk about it, so I thought I could be one of you. I'm looking at you and Mari mostly.
I'll pass to Mari on that.
Right. But
she
if y'all
does good on her
have,
social media.
Thank you, guys.
if y'all have any other ideas, anybody else that I can put in, just let me know. We do have weekly vendors, bi-weekly vendors, and monthly vendors. So I'm being a little flexible this time since it's our first year. Next year, I'm hoping to do just weekly.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yay.
Any other comments, thoughts?
I did want to challenge you guys to put that poster that I put up there in a place that's not your storefront. So whether that be your church, grocery store, gym, wherever.
CrossFit.
Do you have others that, like someone to put it, you have some more?
Yeah, I have a few more.
Taking Ellen's.
All right, we'll move on down to item number 4, groundbreaking for the Arbor Valley project. That's on May the 12th at 11 a.m.
So that's on the project that we're involved with. I have the address on the invite, but if you all could attend that, that would be great. We're actually going to meet with them next week and go over all the logistics and all that fun stuff. But yes, we're excited to finally get that going and have that groundbreaking.
That's good.
I did have one more thing to add. The farmer's market was also on the front cover of the Villarican, and I spoke to Jonathan Dockery from the City Menus. The article that he posted was the #1 for traffic on his entire website before it was posted to social media. So I think it had 900 views by 9 o'clock that morning before he even posted to social. So it was his top performing article, and he knows we have great things happening here in Villarica.
It's got a lot of buzz going.
Yeah.
We were, I don't know if it was yesterday or last week, but sitting outside on the deck, I heard a couple of people, oh, look, they got the farmer's market coming back. I mean, you
Awesome.
just hear people talking
Yeah.
about it, so
Good.
it's good. All right, moving on down to item number 5, DDA applications for open position. Do we have any more applications?
We do not.
Okay. Are we running the ad still?
We have it as an open position.
Okay.
But as Dan mentioned, word of mouth is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys have known of anybody or think of anybody that might be interested, certainly have them apply with the city clerk's office.
Okay. Any public comment? Mr. Barber?
I have one question regarding the DDA application part. Is this for the attorney, or is this for just the chair?
This is the open position.
Okay.
And they need to have a business or a vested interest in Villarica.
Okay, because I know Tyler, my sister's boyfriend from CrossFit, is interested, but I told him to wait just so we could see if we needed real estate or just somebody who's interested in it.
Right. I mean, we certainly are looking for an attorney, but that's a totally
Yeah.
separate position
Okay.
than the open position that we have. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, number 7, any items for the future agenda?
As of now, not for me.
Okay.
Can I ask for public comment from the only public that's here? Uh-huh. Your thoughts on what Mr. McCray said about working with the city on funding sources?
I haven't really. In this last SPLOS that we did with Carol, I put $1 million in there for economic development. We haven't had a single conversation on how to use it. I was thinking about a second industrial park, but I've also just interviewed a firm that would help me with land acquisition under another name. And for the land right here, the DDA would be who would need the whole title, not the city. So, I mean, we may sort of backdoor into this anyway, just because of the Mirror Lake connector and the tab.
Okay.
But I've got to get counsel to, I think that conceptually, they're on board with buying land, but we haven't done it. And when we get down to specific parcels and specific dollar amounts and how's it compared to the appraisal and who owns it, who's next door, I mean, you know, there's just stuff that's gonna come up. I don't know how that's gonna work out till we get there.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping we start getting into business.
Yeah.
If we want more restaurants downtown, the city's going to have to force that issue, which means they have to buy it and then find somebody that will put a restaurant in there. If we want more parking downtown, the city's going to have to force that issue by buying property and then developing the parking structure. So there's things that are obvious that downtown needs, but it's just not going to happen. Somebody's got to make it happen, and the city's the only one with any money around here.
In terms of just the trend, if you go back to when I got here to now, if you just look at the general fund cash balance, you know, we're making progress. If you look at the water and sewer fund, you know, it was in the red, just making progress. One of the good things about the TAD is not only if it's successful, would we get a road that I think is really significant and then, you know, new development, but that's property tax revenue at some point. That may be, you know, 2035 before we see it, but, you know, we're building the base. frustration for y'all, and I understand this because this is an acquired taste, but the ability to get satisfaction out of projects that take 5 years is not something that I got in college, right? And can't say that I like it still, but in y'all's place, you know, you're sort of caught because you want stuff to happen while you're in office, right? I mean, like, you got this position and you want to see like completed buildings with businesses in them. Well, great. But
Ideally.
you know, how long does it take for us to do that whole process? And can you hang in there that long?
Well,
It's not for everybody. I mean, even if it took 2 years, it would seem like forever. And that's a pretty fast project in this market with product and engineering and workforce and delivery. I mean, you know, this. So we'll see how we do. But I mean, there's a whole lot of things that are in the works. So it's not like we're starting from scratch, but a lot of these projects just take a long time. Another thing that I think is frustrating, and I'm not talking about y'all specifically, I'm thinking about just interacting with people in the community or elected officials, whoever. I'm trying desperately to only do things once because I can't even figure out how to pay for them the first time. And the thought that we would rush into something and then look at it and realize that we did it wrong or we did things out of order or whatever, and have to undo it and redo it, just absolutely, it just like turns my stomach because I know if I can't figure out how to do it once and pay for it, I sure can't figure out how to undo it and redo it and pay for it, right? So I think there's a degree of frustration that people have with the RSVP and Butterballs and downtown and
LCI.
all that stuff. But I will say that we have a lot of good ideas and that we have not screwed up yet, right? And I can tell you from the past that we screwed up a lot, right? A lot by just letting things happen. But some of it we did, we made some decisions that aren't helping us today. So I'm trying really hard to not mess up. And I think I've told y'all this analogy before, but you know, I view one way I look at what we're doing is like a baseball game. We don't have to hit a home run every time we do something, right? You can win a baseball game with base hits. And not hitting in the double plays, right? So you got the analogy right. We don't have to be Babe Ruth and hit a home run all the time. We can just make good decisions and just stack a whole bunch of good decisions and have a really, 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 really good outcome, I think. And that's what I'm trying to do now. I think that we've done a lot toward building the team at the staff level. And I don't know if y'all know this, but I mean, our staffing must be up like, I don't know if it's up 50% since I got here, but it's up a lot. I mean, we employ a whole lot more people than we did when I got here. And you can see it in what we're able to do. And that's not super sexy, and nobody in the community is going, man, can you believe how much the staff's grown, you know? But, I mean, I see it. So I think we just need to hang in there, and if I can get this land acquisition guy to come in here and help us and get council on board, then I think we're on the road to what Dan's talking about.
Okay. Excuse me, but I mean, one of the things I heard Dan say that kind of hit home, and maybe it's because I'm new. I mean, this is, you know, me new being
Sandy,
here.
is your mic on?
I thought so, sorry.
Okay.
Is that, it was like, what is your project? So you're saying there's a lot of stuff on the table and behind the scenes, but from a DDA perspective, do we have any projects? Is there anything that we can present or start working on, even if it's small? Like you say, you don't have to hit the home run, but if you can even take a walk, you know?
Yeah, all right.
I mean,
I'll give you, for instance, give me a list of parcels you'd like to see us buy,
okay,
right? I have a list, but I'm not talking about it, right? Because you don't talk about real estate in public.
no,
Right.
exactly.
But you could, like, that's something y'all can do individually. For instance, you know, especially focusing on downtown, you know what, like the whole idea about the restaurant thing that I'm unclear on now is we have more viable restaurants in downtown that make sense to me. And I felt that way ever since I got here. And I have attributed it to the fact that we have become, over time, you know, predating me, we have become a regional dining destination to some extent. Because I can't explain Olive Tree and Uncorked and Cowboys and Evans and Engage and Chat and Chew and Cinema Tavern all being supported by Billerica. But that doesn't make sense to me. But the business locations that most of those operations are in are so, let me think how to say this diplomatically, that's not my strong suit. They're not Class A space, can I say that? And what's gonna get built is gonna be Class A space, right? When Fuquay gets in here, that's gonna be like, I don't know what expensive is, but it's gonna be expensive. And it's gonna attract a different kind of operator. And the problem with the rest of downtown is if you don't already have a kitchen there, I don't see how you ever build a new kitchen in our existing downtown with the square footage that it would be associated with, and those numbers work for the kind of operation that goes downtown. And you could speak to the economics of that better than me, but if we let's say that one of the things that I want to do happens, and I'm trying to attract a developer behind Olive Tree who would build apartments for the Gen X crowd, right? It's going to be adjacent to downtown, they can walk to downtown, whatever, and I'm talking to them about at least one of the buildings having a retail component on the first floor, right? So you'd have at least one mixed-use building, which would sort of extend downtown, because downtown on this side isn't as strong as downtown on the other side, because you got multiple shops and restaurants on that side, but on this side you don't. And then the lodge and the PD break it up, and then the mill breaks it up, and then the Vontae breaks it up. So you know what I'm saying? So it's not contiguous. So I'm not sure what doing something way over there on the other side of Olive Tree does. But I'm thinking but possibly, if we were to find a way to relocate the mill and enlarge it and redevelop or even replace the Avante building and extend downtown, it'd be a different kind of downtown, because it'd be new and so much more expensive, I think, per square foot than what we're paying, right? And honestly, this is the second time I've been a city manager, right? So I did it once by accident as an interim, and then I worked at Fairburn and I came here. So we're trying to do stuff that I have never, ever done, right?
Right.
And we've gone to see Acworth, and we've gone to see Woodstock, but none of those places that we go to can be duplicated, because every one of them is unique. Swanee's unique. We went to Norcross, it's unique. We went to Duluth, it's the way they did it's unique. I mean, everybody's is unique.
We also went to Sugar Hill, which Dan mentioned, and it was I mean, they control their own destiny there.
So
Yeah.
Sugar Hill bought land, they built, I mean, if you hadn't been to Sugar Hill, or Swanee, or Duluth,
Covington.
or Norcross, or Covington, or Ackworth, or, I mean, you can go to all of them, and every one of them, you just walk away going, wow, this is like, but like we went to Ackworth recently, and this is the first place that I've been to that basically said, you know, we had a plan and we're done. 20 years.
Wow.
20 years, right? So, we're right on the beginning of it, I feel like. But we could grow for more than 20 years because of 20. I-20 is gonna make us, or gonna allow us, or push us, or whatever, forever that I can see. So I'm just trying to do the things that I think will lay a good foundation so that people after me can build on it. So I'm trying to fix the things that I see that are screwed up, and trying to only do things, you know, that won't have to be redone or undone. And that may not be everything that everybody wants to see, but, you know, if you're redoing a house, the roof isn't where you start, so. You know, we got some foundational stuff that's pretty messed up still.
So I have a question.
Yep.
So how you just said, like, saying, like, relocating the mill potentially or anything like that, and, like, parcels, like, to buy out and stuff like that. So, example, for me, it would make sense. This back that's for sale right now, like, I know you guys were talking about making a park on the front side of things. Like, if we were potentially to, like, get this land for, like, a reasonable price and all that, and I know the city, like, the dumping area and all that's there, if that was to be able to, like, be relocated or moved to, like, another spot, and that was potentially made like a park, and, like, this back alley was cleaned up and made nice, it would, you could still keep the mill there, but you'd have a lot more traffic, like, around this area, and that would still draw more people to downtown because they're still walking this whole area. And now that church building, well, yeah, it was a little church, right? Right here behind us is for sale, and the big old church over there too, which has the two, it has the gym and the church side over there. So, like, there's a lot in downtown that obviously we just had to get it for the right price, but that could make a lot of things happen in this area. And, like, when I was suggesting the little train, like, if we were to buy that, the train could literally just be around that little area. And a lot of people would be drawn to that because we are a family town, like, especially, like, for us at the restaurant, we get a lot of families. So, and ideally it's still something that I'm working on. I want to make a rooftop patio. So I had to get, like, all the things done and all that to present to the city to hopefully allow that for us. But that would be a potential two-way for seeing the backside and the front and drawing more traffic to downtown Villa Rica, because it's something that we don't have here.
Yeah, think about the things that we talked about that you could sit and, like, doodle on. Parking deck, a bridge over the railroad in 78, relocating the mill, replacing the Avante building with something else. Green space, you know, just a downtown park. I mean, I'll take ideas on anything. That was one of the reasons when we did the LCI that I supported the idea of bringing in a company to do that was from out of state, because I wanted a young set of new eyes. And so it doesn't mean that I like everything they presented or that it's even practical or physically possible, but we got a whole nother set of ideas, right? It wasn't just people from Villa Rica, like, churning the same old, you know, the 15 people that come to things, and, you know what I'm saying? 'Cause
Yeah.
that's where we gravitate toward is.
The RSVP was University of Georgia, so they were not out of state, but they certainly weren't.
Fresh eyes. Yeah.
I think the goal is to, you know, combine those two and somehow marry them to make them work. Like Tom said, everything's not going to work that the LCI presented, but it gives us another vision
Right.
and another opportunity.
Yeah, what I keep telling Chris and the guys is, I'm not gonna be happy with going to council and recommending something for out here unless I think that it's the kind of idea that will make people from all over the state come visit us. Because I think we could do that. But again, it's not gonna do anybody any good, because nobody has this to do whatever we're gonna do, but it could still draw people here. Just like we go to Atworth, we can't do Atworth, but, you know, we get an idea, like the alley and the bridge, and, I mean, you know, we go to Woodstock, and we say, oh, well, we like the way they did the sidewalk treatment, and, man, these restaurants are great, and, man, look at this amphitheater. I mean, we do that everywhere we go. We see one or two things, you know, and I want that to be here. I want people like once a month to come from other cities and see what we did, because it's cool. And it will be. I mean, this is a unique space. But I'll give you another, for instance. Figure out how I get leverage over Norfolk Southern to buy all that. That's all their land. From the front of your building to the front of Gabe's.
I didn't hear what you said. Can you say that again?
All of that's Norfolk Southern.
Okay.
Figure out how we.
Storefront to storefront.
Yeah.
I need leverage against
What you're
the
telling me.
Yep.
railroad to buy that land.
I mean, we're in a situation where we not only have to deal with GDOT, we have to deal with the railroad, and like Tom said, they own. I mean, look how long it took to get the gateway approved for their land. 3 years. Took 3 years for me to get them to sign off on that.
And a serious rental fee.
And a serious rental fee. So,
Like $10,000 a year or something.
yeah. So, you know, that's some things that some cities certainly don't have to deal with. Is those two entities? Those are two big entities, and when they own the land, we have to do what they say.
So they own the land from where, dude?
From the front of her building to the front of Gabe's.
Storefront to storefront.
Storefront to force. Yep.
Sidewalk and everything.
They own all of it. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that really, you know, we can have all the ideas in the world, but if you don't own the land,
Fabulous.
I can't imagine what the lease fee would be for that. But we're gonna get that road back in 3 years. I don't know if y'all know this, the North Bypass went to bid, and the bid opening was last Friday.
Oh, no.
Is that 24 time the break or the?
I'm hoping they build it in 3 years,
Okay.
but I haven't heard who was awarded yet.
Will they expand industrial to 4-lane? Is that part of the plan?
The bypass is only going to be 2 lanes.
No, I mean, I don't know what the bypass will be.
The
but I was
bypass will be just
assuming.
like 61, 2 lanes.
The bypass is going to, that project is gonna improve 101 down to Gold Dust driveway, I think. And it's gonna improve Rock Mart, maybe some going south. I don't remember that it's going up toward Reed Plantation any, and it's not doing anything on 61 on the other end. But you got, you know, have roundabouts on each end.
Hopefully they'll be big enough.
Much needed.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Tom. I didn't mean for my one question to turn into a,
I think
you know, but appreciate it.
you got equal blame up there.
Any other comments, guys?
But not for me.
Y'all come by and see me if y'all wanna sit and talk, or you got some ideas or whatever.
Absolutely.
Will do.
All right. I'll make a motion, or anybody want to make a motion for adjournment?
No, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And I'll second it.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. No, but I'm saying keep the mill there, and if we potentially could have a little park back here, that would be.
Good meeting, but it may have been the longest DDA meeting in history.
Following the longest council meeting we've had, since I've been here too, I think. Council today.
I remember many DDA meetings that we were right